Less than a week ago, the Trump administration said the ousting of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad was no longer a priority. But in the wake of the deadly chemical attack on civilians there, UN Ambassador Nikki Haley went on the offensive.
The truth is that Assad, Russia, and Iran have no interest in peace. The illegitimate Syrian government, led by a man with no conscience, has committed untold atrocities against his people for more than 6 years. Assad has made it clear that he doesn't want to take part in a meaningful political process. Iran has reinforced Assad's military, and Russia has shielded Assad from UN sanctions. How many more children have to die before Russia cares?
Just last Friday, the White House said the Assad regime was a political reality. After comments like Haley's and the president's on Wednesday, where does the Trump administration stand? Politico senior foreign affairs correspondent Michael Crowley joins me now. Michael, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So the president said Wednesday that his attitude towards Syria and Assad has changed very much. His attitude may have changed, but what do we know about policy? What specifically do we understand about the administration's stance on Syria from even before this week?
Well, it's not clear where we're going from here. Before this week, Donald Trump seemed not to care much about what Bashar Assad was doing to his own people, which included past chemical weapons use and basically the daily killing of innocent women and children through conventional weapons, had said repeatedly that it should not be America's policy to try to knock Assad out of power, saying that whoever would replace Assad would be worse, and basically wanted to stay out of Syria except to attack and defeat the Islamic State in kind of a corner of Syria, which is sort of, not a central part of the Syrian civil war. After today's comments, it's really not clear where we're headed.
So Senator Marco Rubio has been critical of the Assad regime and was critical of the Trump administration's apparent shift to allow Assad to stay in power. Here's what he said Wednesday.
If you're Bashar al-Assad and they're basically sending you a signal that in the end we just want you to finish this war quickly and we don't like you, we think you're a bad guy, we think you do bad things, but we think you're better than the alternative, and at this point our priority is just ISIS, and we don't really care what happens after that in the short term, I think that is, in my view, something that would encourage him to do something like what we've just seen. And so I personally do not believe that it's coincidental.
What do you make, Michael, of the senator's comments there? He was obviously referencing not the latest comments that we heard from Nikki Haley and from President Trump, but what we had heard from this administration before.
It's hard to keep up, isn't it? Things are happening so fast and the policy seems to be changing by the day. What Marco Rubio is saying is that in prior comments before Trump's press conference today, the Trump administration may have been sending a signal to Assad that he could get away with using chemical weapons. Actually, Trump has been saying things like this for months and even years. And indeed, he, in 2013, when President Barack Obama was threatening to bomb Syria to punish Assad's use of chemical weapons, Donald Trump was on Twitter saying it was a dumb thing to do. Don't bomb Syria. Fix America first. And indeed, Trump said that it was a mistake for Obama to draw his famous red line against the use of chemical weapons. So Assad has known for a long time, or at least thought he knew, where Donald Trump was coming from on this stuff. I don't think he was responding necessarily to one specific signal, which is why it was so surprising today to see Trump come out so firmly with such outrage and indignation, and even to some observers to suggest the possible use of military force to punish Assad for crossing that red line that he had criticized a few years ago.
We also learned, Michael, on Wednesday that the top White House advisor, Steve Bannon, has been removed from the National Security Council. Now, a senior White House official said Bannon was there as a check on National Security Advisor Mike Flynn. How should we understand this move?
There's a lot of palace intrigue going on. There has been really from day one in this White House. So I think we have to take all the spin from the White House about these personnel moves with a little bit of a grain of salt. What I can tell you we know is that there will be a sigh of relief breathed in the sort of mainstream foreign policy community that Steve Bannon no longer has an official role on the National Security Council. Bannon is an ideologue who has some very strong but kind of extreme and unusual views about the world, about world history, takes a very militant line against Islamic radicalism, is a kind of a reader of history who believes in nationalism, doesn't like the European Union, just a lot of views that are sort of out of the mainstream that people felt he was going to be promoting inside that National Security Council, where as primarily a political advisor, he really didn't belong in the first place. I think there's a sense that this will be maybe kind of a return to normalcy, of a somewhat more normal structure on the National Security Council. Also significant to note that in the restructuring, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the director of National Intelligence, who had been somewhat downgraded in the early NSC structure that had been set up, now have had their roles elevated again. Again, I think that's going to be very comforting to sort of foreign policy establishment traditionalists.
Well, let's talk about China. President Trump is meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping at his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida Thursday. What do you think they'll focus on, and what should the president push him on?
Well, it's pretty clear that Donald Trump is going to make North Korea the heart of his agenda with the Chinese president. Trump is raising loud alarms about North Korea's advancing nuclear program, which is accompanied by a developing ballistic missile program. We're seeing repeated North Korean missile tests, which are pretty provocative. And Trump feels like the status quo can no longer last, and China really is the pressure point on North Korea. I mean, unless Trump is going to initiate military action against North Korea, which would be extremely dangerous and a lot of people think foolhardy, you really need China to clamp down on North Korea. Barack Obama and George W. Bush before him have tried for many years to get the Chinese to get North Korea to change its behavior without much luck. So I don't know if Trump is going to succeed in that. Then, of course, they're going to be talking about trade, probably Taiwan, maybe China's aggressive cyber activities. On the Chinese side, I think they just are looking for status quo, have a good relationship with Trump, and try to get out of there without any kind of big Trump blow-ups.
All right, before we let you go, Michael, let's look ahead to next week. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is traveling to Russia. As you well know, he's been doing things a little differently as Secretary of State. What is it that you're going to be keeping an eye out for out of that trip?
Well, of course, Tillerson has kept a low profile, traveling with very little press. He brought one reporter on his last big trip to Asia. This time he's going to be bringing along 2 reporters, which I guess is some progress from the perspective of openness and transparency. I think what's significant is actually, for all the talk of Trump wanting to have a partnership with Russia and these ongoing investigations into whether the Trump campaign might even have colluded with Russian interference in the election, in the last couple of weeks we're seeing rising tensions between Washington and Moscow, a lot of diplomatic sniping. The State Department put out a tough statement after a lot of political protesters in Russia were arrested a couple of weeks ago. The Kremlin did not take kindly to that. And then you see in today's comments about Syria, Nikki Haley very critical of Russia as essentially an enabler of the Assad regime. And if Trump is preparing to use some kind of military force in Syria, the Russians will not be happy about that at all. So I'll be interested to see what the tone of this visit to Moscow is, whether Tillerson is coming in this tone of kind of partnership and friendship that marked the very early Trump administration, or if we're going to see a little more friction and kind of tense back and forth that has characterized the last couple of weeks a little more.
All right, Michael Crowley from Politico, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.